When it comes to owning multiple Switch consoles, you may hear about the horror stories that it entails, from account systems, save data not being backed up into the cloud service, and Switch Lite drift. Because of this, there are plenty of reasons not to own multiple Switches tied to the same account. I was sat firmly on the camp of why have two, and then something blue came along. Yes, blue. Definitely blue. None of this blurple stuff. Welcome to the Nintendo Village. My name's Gary, and in this video we're going to be going through the pros and cons and dismissing some of the rumours about having multiple Switch systems tied to the same account. We've been on a little bit of a break since Phil went to Germany to work for Nintendo themselves, but it's great to be back. Before we get started, I do want to mention that the schedule is a little bit up in the air at the minute for the next couple of months at least, but do consider subscribing as E3 is fast approaching and there's going to be plenty of Nintendo stuff to talk about. So my original Switch is getting on a bit, and I'm sure that some of you out there who've still got your original Switches have probably come across a problem or two as the console started to age. My day one Switch has a loud fan when it's cold. It makes this sort of grinding noise which is more irritating than anything, and honestly doesn't make me feel very comfortable that the Switch is probably going to see another year or two. My day one Joy-Con, although they've been repaired, have been a victim of drift in the past. Since then, I haven't had any drifting problems, except the rail on the right one no longer works properly, meaning that I can't use it for single Joy-Con games. I've actually got a second pair too, which suffer from various problems in the same sort of way. But the main issue with both sets is that the right Joy-Con just doesn't attach properly to my Switch, meaning that I have to be careful as to whether or not it's actually charging and whether or not it's actually clicked in. There are other few bits and bobs too. The dock would have scratched my screen to bits, but luckily I use screen protectors. And where the Joy-Cons clip in, some of the plastic has started chipping away and cracking. So with all that, and the battery not quite lasting as long as it used to, I decided to pick up a Switch Lite. Now don't get me wrong, my original Switch works perfectly fine when it's docked, which is great because I could have just carried on using it like that. But I've always been a bit of a handheld gamer. I didn't want to completely replace my original Switch, but with the rumours of a Switch Pro on the horizon, I thought it'd be best to pick up the cheaper option. Also, this one is a blue, like a really sexy blue. After scouring the internet to make sure that I could use my one account on two systems, I was starting to get a little bit worried. Would my save files and games transfer across? Could I only have my accounts tied to one system? And is this going to be a pain to set up? Well, the answer to all these actually isn't quite as complicated as you might think. Setting up a second Switch is actually fairly easy. It's a case of popping your account onto there and then you're good to go. Well, kinda. What you really want to do if you want a multiple Switch setup is think about which Switch is going to be your main console. The reason is the secondary console has to clock in on the internet in order to play purchases made through the eShop. Meaning that if you want to quickly jump on Celeste but don't have an internet connection, well, you're out of luck. But to clarify, this doesn't actually affect games that are on cartridge. To me, this really isn't that much of an issue. I barely ever find myself going somewhere without an internet connection. There's always cafes or hotels, hotspots pretty much everywhere. Shopping malls, shopping centres, they all have them too. And worst case scenario, you just tether it to your phone. I mean, the Switch only has to quickly check in online and then you can turn the internet connection off and it's fine, it's good to go. I keep my original Switch as the main one still. With it being at home, it's less likely to go missing or get stolen. Also, if the Joy-Con drift, it's not as bad because you can just change them out on the original Switch. Whereas if the Switch Lite did, you'd have to send it off to repair, and Nintendo famously delete your saved data on it. In my opinion, you're just better off having your secondary Switch as the one that you're more likely to carry around with you. It just seems like the safer option. Saved data, however, is where things get interesting. As long as you're signed up to the Nintendo Switch Online, then you have the ability to back up your saved data to the cloud. There are a few exceptions to the rule, such as Animal Crossing New Horizons and Splatoon 2, so you won't be playing those games over multiple Switch consoles. The cloud backup is also meant to be fully automated to keep your save files up to date. From my experience, this doesn't work very well. It backs them up fine, but it doesn't download them automatically. I find myself having to do that manually. That's not a big deal though, you only have to press plus over the software and then click download the file and hey presto, you're good to go. Also, if your data hasn't been backed up by the cloud, you can also do it manually too. This I've had to do on a few occasions, and again, it's really not that much of a nightmare. Sure, none of this is exactly perfect. That's why I tend to play certain games on the Switch Lite and certain games on the original Switch that's docked. It's really not that much of a nightmare to transfer the files between the two, but I always feel that some games are more suited to one than the other anyway. Honestly, I really like the Switch Lite more. Its smaller screen is more comfortable and a better size for a handheld. It's much sturdier and just feels like it's been built much better. It barely creaks or flexes like the original one does. It's genuinely more comfortable, and the D-pad is a massive bonus, especially if you like playing retro games or a lot of the eShop stuff. And sure, the Switch Lite is limited on the stuff that it can play. There's no Labo here, and a lot of the games that require single Joy-Con, they're out the window. Same with Mario Party, you'd have to use another set of Joy-Cons that you've probably bought separately, or the ones off your original Switch in order to play that, but it's worth the trade-off for the single player experience that's much better. It's also worth mentioning that the Rumble's missing too, but after years of playing DS and Game Boy, I actually don't really care that much about Rumble anymore. But as I've said, for a single player experience, I much prefer being curled up on the sofa playing the Switch Lite. And what about you guys? Do you guys have a multiple Switch setup, or do you think it's just too dumb because of the account system? And are you picking up this lovely blue version because honestly it's so beautiful? Anyway, I'm off to play Pokemon Snap on this thing, so I'll catch you next time.